Before this episode of Dear Daughter starts, I want you to know it's about a distressing subject. I'll be talking about baby loss. I just wanted to tell you in case you feel it might be too difficult for you to listen to. Hello, I'm Namulanta Kombo, and this is my podcast, Dear Daughter, which I'm making with the BBC World Service.
Dear daughter.
Dear daughter.
My dear daughter.
Dear daughter.
Thank you so much for all your letters and downloads. It's nearly the end of our first season, and I've had so many interesting conversations. But as I say, today's episode is about a distressing subject. Deborah is a psychologist. She lives in the west of Ireland, and she's a mother of 3, 2 living children, and Sibby, who was stillborn in November of 2020. She's been writing letters to her stillborn daughter, a whole notebook full of letters. She's going to read one to us later on. This is the hardest interview I've done on the podcast yet, and some of it is really difficult to listen to. But this is such a common issue. 1 in 4 pregnancies around the world ends in the loss of a baby. So if it hasn't affected you personally, it's affected someone you know. I found this to be a very moving conversation, and she had some really powerful advice for other people in the same situation. But be warned, it's a very emotional interview and contains parts which some listeners may find upsetting. So with that said, this is Deborah and episode 12. Empty Arms. Deborah, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and talking about something that's, so close to your heart and devastating, really.
Sure, and thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. I love to talk about Sibby and tell her story, so I really am thankful so much for the opportunity to do that. People might ask me, oh, how many kids do you have? Just in the hairdressers or something. And I almost feel like, oh God, I feel for the other person because I know what's coming. They don't know what's coming, and that's difficult. So I think thank you for your bravery in choosing this as a subject for your podcast.
Like I said, I'm really grateful that you came on to talk about something that is so devastating for you and your family, but also affects so many other people around the world, many of whom don't know how to, how to go about their daily day, don't know how to grieve. So it's a real honor for you to come on and talk to everyone about it. Could you tell us what happened?
Yeah, so I got pregnant with Sibby in March 2020 and had a very healthy pregnancy, or so we believed. Absolutely no issues, even minor issues. Attended numerous appointments and scans, everything seemed fine. And then at 40 weeks, exactly on Sibby's due date, the 22nd of November, I put my children to bed as usual, and I noticed that the baby wasn't moving. I knew immediately that something was wrong, and I phoned the hospital here in Galway, and they advised me to come in. And when I went in there, I never imagined that our baby had died. I thought maybe emergency section or something, an emergency would sort of unfold or something like that, or that everything would be fine and I would be sent home. So when we went into the hospital, the midwife was very reassuring. She told me, look, you're a very low risk pregnancy. We'll do a few tests, we'll do the scan, and then we'll see what happens. So she attempted to find the baby's heartbeat with a handheld Doppler. And after a few moments, she said, look, maybe the battery's gone in this. I'll go and get another one. She went and got a second one, and a second midwife came in. So they both tried with 2 different Dopplers. And my husband wasn't allowed in with me because of COVID. And she said to me, is your husband outside the door? And I knew immediately that the news wasn't good.
The midwife fetched a consultant for a full scan.
It was really apparent straight away that there was no heartbeat. I have 2 other children and I have had a lot of scans, both in all 3 pregnancies. And so I knew immediately when she turned it on that there was no heartbeat. And from there then, I guess they gave us a little bit of time to um, to ourselves. But the shock is so huge, you're not really processing anything. You're just in that state of, oh my God, is this happening? It's all so surreal. We came home that night, putting my 7-year-old little girl to bed. I had said to her, look, this is the baby's due date. Our baby can come any time now, because kids are so impatient and time seems so long. And I had said to her, look, any day now we will get our little baby. And she so desperately wanted a sister. So that had been the message I had given her going to bed that night. And within a couple of hours, I was having to tell her that actually we aren't going to get to bring our baby home. The baby has died. And that's the hardest thing I've ever had to do as her mum, is to share that with her.
The hospital gave Deborah some drugs to stop the pregnancy and sent her home. The plan was for her to come back and deliver the baby 2 days later.
Those 2 days, I couldn't really tell you all that I did or didn't do. I know that family came to see us. I know that I unpacked my hospital bag and repacked it. And I remember sitting on the floor doing that, crying, thinking, I don't know what to pack in my hospital bag when your baby isn't living. It's very different. You're sitting there and you're thinking, do I need nappies? How many do I need?
So after the scan on the Sunday, on Wednesday, Deborah went back to the hospital to give birth.
At 2 o'clock in the morning, my waters broke and I was brought to the labour ward. And that's a very different experience when your baby isn't born alive. It was nighttime as well, so the room was dimly lit. I feel like it was a lonely experience, even though I had my midwife there and she was just fabulous, and I had my husband there. But I was just very aware um, of the loneliness, I suppose, of where we were at. Um, so at 3 minutes to 7, Sibby was born. And I had said to my midwife during my labour, when she is born, can you please say, congratulations, it's a girl, in your most cheerful, happiest voice? I just had this thing that even though Sibby wasn't alive, I didn't want her to be born into great sadness where there was just silence in the room. I think so much of stillbirth is silent that I really wanted Sibby to know, wherever she was, if she is somewhere, that we were delighted to meet her, even though my heart was broken into a million pieces, that she wasn't going to be alive, that I wasn't going to hear her cry. I just wanted that for her. And my wonderful midwife, Julie, did that as soon as Sibby was born. She looked up with her biggest, greatest smile and said, congratulations, it's a girl. And I am so thankful for her for that. And so we spent some time together. We did the skin to skin, and my children came in that evening to meet their little sister, and that was a very special visit. My 7-year-old is just wonderful. She was 5 at the time, and it sounds strange, but it didn't matter that Sibby wasn't alive. She cuddled her and she kissed her and she talked to her like she would have had she been alive. We had that night together with Sibby and we slept with her in our arms and we sang to her. My husband gave her her first dance. I danced with her. We told her all about her family, all about ourselves. We kissed her, we changed her clothes, we did all the things that you might do. We took lots of photographs, and the hospital did her hand and footprints in ink and clay.
The next morning, they took Sibby home.
Here in Ireland, you do get to bring your baby home. So we were thankfully able to bring her home. Our families were here. My son and daughter were here. And everybody in our family got to meet her immediate family, brothers and sisters and grandparents. And we had a night at home with her then, just myself, my husband, our 2 living children and Sibby. Sibby was buried the following day. She had really changed a lot by the next morning. And although we never wanted to say goodbye, we felt that we couldn't hang on to her. it's really hard to get your head around the fact that your baby has died. I remember when we were planning to leave the hospital the night before, I said to the midwife, "Oh, I better get somebody to bring in the car seat." And she just kind of said to me, "Oh, no, you don't need that." And so when we were leaving the hospital, I just took Sibby on my knee in the front seat of our car. And we drove, the morgue is just at the back of the hospital, and my husband went in. And I'll never forget him coming down the steps with this tiny white coffin. Um, and he brought it to the car and he said to me, I'll just put it on the back seat. And I remember us considering, should we put the seatbelt around it and all these kind of strange things. And we drove home and we stopped at some traffic lights. And I remember just looking over at the car beside us. There was a man in a car beside us. And I said to my husband, he has no idea that we are in this car and we are holding our dead daughter in my arms with her coffin in the back. You just have these moments where you think, my God, how did we survive that? But we had a beautiful ceremony for Sibby, and then she was buried with my grandparents, and my son and daughter were present for that, and our own parents and our brothers and sisters. And yeah, that's kind of that was the week from finding out that Sibby had died to burying her. But of course, that was only the beginning of our grief journey.
It's unbelievable that all that happened in a week. It feels like a lifetime. But can I just say, Deborah, I'm so sorry.
I suppose it did happen, all that happened in a week, but the day after she was buried, I would describe that as the most difficult day of grieving that I have had. Because when you're going through that week, you have things to do and you have your baby. You're going almost from one task to the next, one day to the next. You're not thinking very far ahead. You're not thinking past the funeral or the burial. And I remember the next morning, and I just thought, oh my God, now what? And I remember looking in the mirror, and my bump would have been still quite prominent. And it was like my arms were surplus to requirement. When you're pregnant, your hands are generally on your bump, or you're patting your bump, or you're talking to your baby and rubbing your bump. You rest your hands on your bump. And once your baby is born, your arms are full. Your baby is in your arms, and you never really think about your bump in that way. But I was standing there, and I had no baby, and my baby wasn't in my bump, and I couldn't bear to touch that bump. And I just didn't know what to do with my arms. And I remember sitting on them for a lot of the day because they just ached to hold her.
And you've been writing letters to Sibby.
Yeah.
When did you start writing the letters?
I was just looking at the letters this morning, and the first letter I wrote to her was 6 weeks after she died. I didn't know any other parents personally at that stage, or in my sort of close circle, who had lost a child. And I read lots and lots of books. I love to read. So when she died, I sort of ordered every book that I could. And I guess I started to write as a place to, number one, to talk to Sibby, to tell her all of the things that I won't get the chance to tell her in person, but felt that I needed to tell her, or that I need to tell her. I could be triggered by something very small, like folding my daughter's clothes from the washing machine and then suddenly realizing I'll never fold Sibby's. I write to her still, lots of different letters, just what I may be feeling on a day. They are very much just my own thoughts and feelings. I don't think about what I'm saying. I just write, and I don't normally read them back. Not for any particular reason. I just continue on to the next letter. But they're definitely a way of helping me to process the grief and to continue my relationship with her, because it very much is we now know with grief that you don't just go through the 5 stages and that's it. It's not a linear process. We know now that it is a continued bond, that you continue to have a relationship with your loved one, and this very much is a way that I parent Sibby and continue my relationship with her, albeit in a very different way.
And would you read us one of the letters?
Yes. My husband picked this letter. I'm not very good at being objective, so I just allowed him to read a letter. So I'll just go ahead and read it to you. Dear Sibby, memories were made so that we could have roses in December, or so they say. And I guess I'm finding that saying to be true, my love, because the memories we have of our time with you are so precious to us now. And I can feel myself clinging to them for dear life. They keep me holding on to hope, even at times, if it is only by a thread. Today I made some wreaths for your grave, and just like at Christmas, it broke my heart into a million pieces. I wonder how a heart can keep on breaking into more and more pieces, and yet mine does. You are gone, my flower, so I cannot tend to your every need as a mummy should and yearns to do. There are to be no nighttime feeds, no bedtime snuggles or daytime cuddles, nor will there be for us sweet lullabies, nor bath time fun, nor will I place 1,000 sweet butterfly baby kisses on your chubby little cheeks. Instead, I pour all of that love into the flowers that shower your resting place. Sibby, please know that I have carefully selected each flower and I place it with all of my love. And as I do so, I think of you and I whisper that I love you. These are the things that I have left now to show you how much that I care. And I would have taken great care of you, my darling. I would have showered you with love. So instead, I will shower your memory with love and care for you and parent you in a different way. Because love lasts forever, Sibby, and your passing has opened my eyes and heart to the fact that love is always the answer. Love is the greatest gift we can give to ourselves and to others. The most powerful of emotions that endures even in our darkest hours. Love gives us hope and the strength to carry on, and I know our love for you will guide us through. All of my love to you, my darling, Mummy.
That's beautiful. When did you write that letter?
That letter was written on the 16th of January, so just short of 2 months after Sibby died.
And is that typical of the type of letters that you would write to her?
Yeah, that would be typical. I suppose they're just so varied and so different. Sometimes I might write and I might tell her all about her brother and her sister and what their personalities are like or what their relationship is like. I've written her letters to her on her birthday. I've written all about her daddy and told her all the wonderful things and what a wonderful person he is and a wonderful dad he is. Just, yeah, if I've had a dream of her, I might write that in a letter and tell her all about the dream. Or I might just be really missing her on a day and write about that and all the things I miss. I've written letters to her about her loss because whilst my loss is great, and some people will say it is the greatest for a mother, Sibby's, what she has lost is the greatest of all. She has lost everything. I've written a letter about that to her. Just, they're varied, I guess, but generally probably that kind of tone, maybe.
And you mentioned Christmas in the letter, and Sibby passed away in November. So what was that first Christmas like?
It was really difficult, really, really difficult. I think we were still in shock, really reeling, I would say, from it all. We, of course, Santa came and we had all the joy of that, and you really dig deep to provide all of the joy of Christmas because it is such a special time for Christmas. And that's one thing that I'm very conscious of in our grief journey is that our house was quite fun before Sibby died, and I make a huge effort to make sure that it's still fun for our children and strike the right balance. I wouldn't want them to grow up and think, God, the house was so much fun, and then Sibby died, and it was so sad.
Yeah, which is, what I was alluding to, because you still have to parent your two living children. And I just wanted to know how that has been in terms of how you cope with doing your best for them and recognizing how they're feeling and, just day to day. How do you continue to parent when you feel this extraordinary grief?
Yeah, it is really challenging and it can be really difficult. There are days where you don't want to get up out of the bed and yet you have to. And in that moment, maybe you're not feeling like that. But I guess on the whole, we are really grateful that we have two gorgeous living children who need us and need us to get up in the morning. What I suppose works for me is that making space at a different time for my grief. So when the kids go to bed, that might be a time where I might check in with myself or check in with my husband, how we're doing or how the day has been, a sort of debriefing, if you want to call it that, or I will take time at other parts of the day or do something. So get out for a walk, go for a run, go for a sea swim, go to hot yoga, write a letter to Sibby. I think you have to constantly look at all of the different tools in your toolbox that can help you get through. But of course, there are days when it is really, really difficult and you just make it through the day. And I remember in the beginning, you just survived the day. And as long as the kids were fed and had survived the day and gone to bed, then that was a win, even if you did nothing else.
Yeah. And what about their grieving process and your husband's?
I was lucky in that for the 2 years prior to Sibby's death, I was working in a charity with children who were bereaved. So I had a lot of knowledge about how to talk to children about death and dying and when a loved one dies. So I was very fortunate to have that in my background. So when Sibby died, I didn't have to think about what to say or the words to choose. That sort of just came naturally to me. So I'm eternally grateful for my time there. So we had to be very careful in our words, in using the words death and dying. And when you die, nothing works and you can't come back, around the permanency of death. And the more trickier questions about what happens when you die. I suppose Sibby is part of our everyday life in this house. And both my kids would say goodnight to her every night. They sing Twinkle, Twinkle to her picture and they blow her kisses and then they give her a kiss and they go to bed. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question.
It does. It does. And like you've mentioned, you have professional experience in bereavement when you're working with kids, and as a psychologist. How do you straddle the two? So Deborah, the psychologist, and Deborah, the grieving mom. I suppose you know how you would advise someone to, get through the grieving. But how's that working for you as a person grieving?
Yeah, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes having the knowledge doesn't make it easier to do the things. I would always say that I have grieved as Sibby's mum and not as a psychologist. And did being a psychologist help me in those early days? No, it didn't. I was just a mum who had lost her baby, and it really wouldn't have mattered what I did. The grief and the emotion and the rawness of all of that. Yes, I know if I'm having a particularly bad day, what I can do or what might help. But I suppose I don't really straddle the two as much, maybe. I think I just grieve as her mum.
Yeah. And what would you say to other families that are going through this, knowing what you know?
Knowing what I know, I would say to be gentle with themselves, that it takes a very, very long time. And I would say to find your support network, find the people who can sit and listen without trying to fix you, who are willing to talk about it, and find what works for you. There's no rule book with grief. Everybody's experience is so, so different. And I think it's important to keep that in your mind. What works for one person might not work for you, and you sort of have to carve your own way, but do that with support.
And when you heard about the podcast and when you felt that this was something that you could contribute to, I don't think I'd have the strength to do it, but you did. And as grateful as I am, I'm just curious to know why you felt it was important to share this with us.
I made Sibby lots of promises in my time with her, and one of the things that I promised her was that people would know her name and would know her story. And that's really important to me. There's far less opportunities to talk about your child who has died because they aren't here. And it's important for me to talk about her and to tell her story, because she deserves that. She deserves to be known. I suppose the second reason for doing the podcast is that stillbirth still isn't talked about that much. I think we have a bit of a way to go in society in terms of talking about pregnancy loss and baby loss. And I think it's really important that those subjects are talked about and that people are given an opportunity to share their story. And so it's such a huge thing to go through, to lose your child. And I think if somebody else, if even one person listening to this podcast took something from this podcast or knew something more about how to support somebody who has been through the loss of their child or pregnancy loss, then I would be more than happy with that.
I suppose with me, I don't feel like I don't feel like I feel like I'll say the wrong thing.
And I think it's okay to say that. Lots of people would say to me, I don't know what to say, or I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. And I would actually welcome that, because I think the most difficult thing has been where people have said nothing. And so I think how brave of someone to own it and say, I don't know what to say. And I'll say that's fine, because you know what, there's lots of times I don't know myself what to say about it. And sometimes there are no words. And I think that just opens up the conversation then for a person to discuss it or not discuss it or talk about it themselves.
Yeah, but to acknowledge that, you know, she was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That she
And
was
she still
there.
is.
And she still is. She is still in my heart and in our home and in our lives. And she is just as big a part as the two living children. She's just a part of our family in a very different way.
The song Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is one that I've been singing for my kids, and I've had, since I was a child. But speaking to Deborah today and hearing that it's a song that her and her family sing to Sibi every night before they go to sleep puts a whole new perspective to the song. And when I think about the words now, it's twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. It's just the perfect way to immortalize Sibi. She was here, she's a star, and she continues to be here watching over her family and being a part of the family. And it's not natural to have to bury your child. And it's such a difficult conversation to have. And it's amazing that Deborah wants to share this. I can't imagine that I would be strong enough to do that. But I think it's not really about having the strength to do it. It's about having the longing to make sure that your child is seen and she's heard, and for us to know that she lived. And it's such an amazing outpouring of love through her grief. I think that whoever's listening, by listening to this podcast and sharing it, we have helped Deborah achieve her promise to Sibi, which was to say Sibi's name and to have people know that Sibi was here, and to have people know that Sibi is still with Deborah's family, and continue to pray for everyone out there who is going through this incredibly hard time. If you've been affected by the issues we've talked about today, don't suffer in silence. There are support charities available in many countries in the world, or it can help to talk to a medical professional or someone you trust. Dear Daughter is presented by me, Namulanta Kombo, and produced by me and Lucy Burns with support from Natasha Fernandez, Adoni Mushiri, and Charlotte MacDonald. The editor is Penny Murphy. Mixed by Neil Churchill. Theme music composed by Justin Nichols. Al Riddell is a BBC World Service podcast producer, and John Manel is a podcast commissioning editor. See you next time.